Hey y'all, welcome back to Kisty Reads. Today I am talking about the 10 series that I want to start in 2021 and hopefully finish. The first one in that list of series that I want to start is actually A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. This is a YA fantasy and most of you already know what it is about, so I'm not going to go too deep into the synopsis, but this is a fantasy story that I wanted to start last year in 2020, but I didn't get around to it, mostly because other series were catching my attention and I was binge reading those, and we all know who I'm talking about. But V.E. Schwab is one of those authors I hear a ton about. I hear a ton of mixed reviews, but then I also hear some really amazing rave reviews about her work. So I definitely want to read more of her work and see what I think of it for myself. If you guys have read A Darker Shade of Magic and loved it or hated it, let me know in the comments below. I feel like this series is a really polarizing one. The next one I feel like I need to read is actually the Shadowhunters series, and I think the first one that was ever published in this series is City of Bones in the Mortal Instruments series of the Shadowhunter world. So I've been informed to go by publication order if I want to read it. I know that there are a million books in this series, so I likely won't finish it all this year, and I don't even know if I'll like it enough to continue. But I do have the first 3 books, so I definitely want to at least read the first 3 books in this world and see what I think of them. These are like YA based novels, and I think maybe the first few are even a little bit more middle grade. So I'm going into this with expectations that it won't be super YA written, but maybe even more middle grade written. I feel like this is a series that I have to at least try it once because it's so popular and people love it so much that I really need to see what all the hype is about and to see if I agree. So this is on my list of what to read in 2021. I know that a bunch of you have already read it, so I would definitely appreciate if you gave me your opinions down in the comments below, because I always want to know what you guys think of this and if you liked it or not, and what you think of me reading it now rather than reading it in middle school. The next one is actually just the entire box set, and that is the Shadow and Bone series. I haven't even opened this, I haven't even read it, but I have really been wanting to read a book by Leigh Bardugo, and I have been hearing a lot about her Grishaverse, and I know that I need to start with this series if I want to read it. I know that there are some folks that have started with Six of Crows, but I haven't gotten that far, and I figured I would get into this series first and then Six of Crows. However, I've been hearing some not so good things about Shadow and Bone, and that makes me really hesitant to start. But there is the Netflix show that's coming out that's Shadow and Bone, and I feel like I should read, or at least give Shadow and Bone the book a shot before that comes out, which is where this goal is coming from. By the premise, this does sound like a series I would really enjoy. So Alina, our main character, is in a war type setting where she is fighting, and her regiment is attacked and her best friend is brutally injured, and her dormant power comes to the surface. She is then taken by the Grisha, which are these evil, I think, flesh-eating monsters that are led by the Darkling, and they are all magical elite, even though they are kind of like these monstrous beings, and she's being taken there to be trained, I'm assuming because of her dormant power that she discovers. And I think that's where our story starts, and her discovering the secrets of the Grisha and her own internal secrets about her magic, etc., is where the story takes us. So I'm definitely going to give Shadow and Bone a really healthy shot, and hopefully I will like it and I won't give up on this series. The next series that I want to get into is actually a manga series, and I've been so excited that I got the first 2 volumes, and they are stunning, and that is Death Note by Tsugumi Oba, and I'm hoping that I'm pronouncing that name right, and I'm really sorry that if I'm not. This is the story of a boy that finds Death Note, which is left behind by a death god, and this is basically a notebook where if you write someone's name down, they will die. So Light, who's our main character, his goal is to rid the world of evil by using this Death Note, but I think things kind of end up going awry, which is where our story starts. It kind of is this like evil object versus noble goals type of story, and I think that's going to be really interesting and something that I'm not used to reading. Definitely a different kind of manga or novel series for me. I've only read a little bit of graphic novels, and I really started to last year. I think I started like 3 graphic novel series, and I liked pretty much most of them, so I'm really hoping that I'm gonna like this series. I've heard a lot about it, and it is one of the booktube darlings in terms of manga, so I'm hoping that it will also be a darling for me. The next series that I really want to read is one that I wish I kind of had read in 2020, and that is the Poppy War series. I have this beautiful paperback, but I am silently regretting not getting the hardbacks because the hardbacks are absolutely stunning. And this is an Asian inspired fantasy with a really strong female character, which I love. So Rin, our main character, passes all these tests with flying colors of being a warrior, where originally she was going to be married off to be a wife and mother. But no one can deny these amazing test scores that she has, so she's shipped off to the most elite military school as a poor peasant girl. And of course her classmates target her. She has this incredible shamanic power, and there is a war that looms over her world. So Rin's shamanic powers might be the only way to save her people, but she worries that it will cost her her humanity, and thus begins our story. Now, if you haven't heard of this book, and if that premise doesn't sound interesting to you, I don't know what you're doing with your life, because this just sounds so good and definitely something different. Even in my personal life, I think shamanism is just so cool and definitely something that I would like to be around and interact with. And the fact that it's in a fantasy book, it just adds icing to the cake where my personal and book interests lie. So I can't wait to get into the series. It is fully published now, which is also great because I can just go ahead and binge it, which is always the best feeling ever. The next one is also a series that a few of my favorite booktubers have talked about and definitely put on my radar. The second one in the series came out in 2019, but this first one is the one I'm obviously going to start with, and that is The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winters. This book sounds really interesting. I've heard it's a lot of battle scenes. It's a very battle-driven novel, and it starts out with our main character who just wants to live a normal basic life, but the society that he lives in is built upon war. So there's always battles, there's always fighting, there's always war, even though Tao, our main character, does not want that. And he has a plan to get himself out of this world, but 3 of the most important people in his life that he loves a lot are brutally murdered. So he makes this vow to become the greatest swordsman that ever lived and bring vengeance to those that were taken from him. So this sounds amazing. A vengeance story, swords, battles, betrayal, intrigue, and I'm hoping that there's dragons in this too. Yes, sign me up. I'm here for this. So the last 2 series that I was talking about were actually adult fantasy series, and that is the Nevernight series by Jay Kristoff. I've heard a lot of differing mixed reviews of this series, but I still expect that I will love it. It is based on dark academia for assassins, which sounds amazing. And our main character is female, so I'm really interested to see how Jay Kristoff writes his females, because again, I haven't read any of his books before, so I don't know. But I'm really intrigued. I have all 3 of these, so I can also go ahead and binge read this series, which is like my favorite thing to do, is just to binge read series. I hate waiting for stuff to come out, and this one sounds like a story that I'll really enjoy, so I'm excited. I was supposed to get into this series in 2020, and of course I failed, but here's hoping to get into this in 2021. The next series that I want to get into is by one of my favorite authors, N.K. Jemisin, and that is The 100,000 Kingdoms, which is the first book in the Inheritance trilogy. Now, in a true N.K. Jemisin nature, she barely gives us anything about the plot for this book, but even still it sounds so intriguing. And if you read her Broken Earth series, I feel like you'll understand that pain, but also that glory. This book just captivates and compels me from the synopsis, and also just knowing her writing, I am just doubly compelled to read it. I have all 3 books. Again, this is a completed trilogy, and I love that because again, I can binge read it, and who doesn't love a good binge read? Since we have a really short synopsis, I'm just gonna read it to you because it's really hard to explain. Yane Dar is an outcast from the barbarian north. When her mother dies under mysterious circumstances, she is summoned to the majestic city of Sky. There, to her shock, Yane is named an heiress to the king, but the throne of the 100,000 kingdoms is not easily won, and Yane is thrust into a vicious power struggle. Palaces in the sky, intrigue, betrayal, struggle. Yes, honey, I am here for this. And knowing N.K. Jemisin, this is bound to be a really well-written, well-thought-out series. The next series that I really want to read is a YA fantasy series, and that is Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. This is a series that I also wanted to get into in 2020, and I'm not really sure why. I think just so many other books and series, as I was discovering more and more books, were capturing my attention, and this one just ended up being more on the back burner. But it's definitely a duology that I want to just read and finish. I don't know why I haven't. I'm pretty sure there's only going to be 2 books in this series. I don't believe the author is planning on the 3rd one, but correct me if I'm wrong. You guys can leave it in the comments down below, but I think it's only going to be 2 books. The first book follows our main character Zelly in the world that she lives in, and in this world there used to be magic humming everywhere, but the royal kingdom made sure that magic was eradicated. Our main character Zelly has magic in her, and she's trying to put magic back into the world while the prince is hunting down magic at the same time. So she forms an alliance with a rogue princess who is trying to help her get magic back into the world while the crown prince is hunting magic and trying to destroy it. So she has to figure all this out while controlling her own powers. And honestly, I don't know why I haven't read it. Like, just describing it to you guys makes me so excited to read it again and so excited to get my hands on it. I don't know when I'll be able to because my January TBR is just so full, but I can't wait to read this series. I know that some of you have read it, and if you have read it, leave your comments down below because I definitely want to know what you thought of it and to see what your guys' ratings were versus what I'll think of it when I finally get around to reading this one in 2021. So the last series I'm gonna get into is one that I think I've been reading since like high school. I used to read adult fantasy novels like they were water when I was younger, and I obviously want to get into more adult fantasy, so this is one that I want to reread and then finish because I remember really enjoying it. And I haven't really heard it talked about on BookTube all that much, but again, it is an older series, so maybe that's the reason why. And that series is Cushion's Dart by Jacqueline Carey. I don't know if I'm saying the name right, but that's just what it sounds like in my head. This is about a courtesan named Phaedra who also ends up becoming a spy, and she discovers some secrets about the world that she lives in, and these secrets are threatening her world. So she has to find a way to get the information and save her world by still being a courtesan and a spy and someone that does not have a very high status in this society. So that's all I'm gonna give you guys. It is a more complex novel than the synopsis lets you believe, but it is a good series from what I remember, and I'm excited to finally finish it and read it. This is the mass market paperback. I don't think they have any other ones. This is definitely a chunky series, but one that I was really into when I was younger and one that I want to read now. I know that probably for my younger self this wasn't the most appropriate series, but I think it's gonna be just as juicy and steamy as I felt it to be when I was younger, and I can't wait to get back into a series that I just could never let go of even after all of these years. The actual last series for this list is going to be The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. Now, I think everyone on BookTube knows this series, so I'm not going to go into it. And even if I wanted to, I wouldn't know exactly how to describe the series because I think it's just that complex and that immersive. But this is a high epic fantasy from Brandon Sanderson and one of his most famous. I have been told by Sanderson fans who also know that I do read chunky adult fantasy from time to time, and I can handle it, that I should start with The Way of the Kings. And that is the one I'm starting with. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy with me right now because I have ordered it. I opted for the UK version because I think it's just much more beautiful than the US version, and since I have the choice between the two and I have to order it anyway, I chose the UK version. So I'm really excited to get into this. I think I'm starting this series in February, and I know that the fourth one came out last year and everyone was up in arms about it. So I get to binge read this 1,000-page book and then binge read the rest of the series, and I think all of the books in this series are huge tomes, but I am still all for it, and I just can't wait to dive into this world that everyone has been talking about. So those are the 10 series that I want to read in 2021. I'm really excited that it's a mix of both YA and adult fantasy. I wouldn't have it any other way, and yes, they are mostly fantasy stories because that is what I'm mainly into, but of course if I find other series over the year that I like, I'll be reading those too. Of course, why not? The more books, the better. If you liked this video, please click the like button down below. And if you like the content on my channel, please subscribe as I will be posting videos that you will not want to miss. Thank you.